Hi, I'm Joe with Neoti. We're up here at the Neoti Tech Center for another Tech Talk. What we're going to talk about today is seam adjustment. Seam adjustment is one of the last steps that a technician takes to really dial in that video screen after it's built. Now, what happens is this is a digital band-aid over a physical issue. So when one panel is not fully up against the other panel, either vertically or like this or horizontally, then that's what we call a seam. Like it's just not sitting on there well enough, or it's not close together. And this is really apparent in high resolution LED screens, a lot more than it would be in low resolution because the diodes are so close that it shows that imperfection, right? And so we do our absolute best as installers to take our time and make sure that there are no seams in a screen. But on almost every install, a seam here or there is almost inevitable because of imperfections in the bracketry or imperfections on the wall that it's mounting on, or imperfections in the surface, like to get a perfectly level, smooth, flat surface to build on. Is almost impossible, so there's a lot of shimming that has to be done. Remember, we're talking about some super high resolution LED screens, and so imperfections like that can happen. So how do we fix that? If you have a physical problem that you can't get around and you're gonna have just a little bit of a seam, how do we fix it? So what I've done in this wall is I've opened up a seam on purpose, right? I've taken the bracket off the top and I've taken a screwdriver, kind of wedged it in there, and I opened up a seam. And I'm simulating, this is a bad seam. This is a worse seam than what it would normally be, what I'm calling an imperfection. But this is just to give you an example of what's possible. So what we could do is in the software, I could select this seam portion of the screen. What it does is it selects the column of diodes that are on one side of that gap and the other column of diodes on the other edge of that gap. And I can turn up the brightness on the diodes in that gap. And what that does is that visually blends it together to where you can't see the seam, right? So let me show you an example of that happening. So what you can do is you can go into the seam adjustment portion of the calibration section of this software. You can select just that seam, and then I can turn the brightness up or down. The opposite of this is when the seams are too close together, that seam will look a little too bright. So you want to turn it down. But in this situation, I've opened up the seam, so I'm going to want to turn it up by about that much for now. And when I hit save, you'll see that seam kind of go away on the picture. Now that was worst case scenario. We do not want a seam like that in our wall. We don't ever want to get to the point where we're doing that kind of level of adjustability. But this just is a high contrast demonstration showing you what is possible if we have an obstacle that we can't physically get around, how we can still make a really good image on your screen and on your wall. I hope this was helpful. If you have any questions or concerns, just give us a call or visit our website at neoti.com.